President Joe Biden is announcing the cancellation of $1.2 billion in student debt, which impacts hundreds of thousands of student borrowers across the country. Now, the administration's latest tranche of loan forgiveness, tranche, think of batch of loan forgiveness, covers borrowers who are enrolled in Biden's new loan repayment program, initially borrowed $12,000 or less, and have been repaying their debt for at least 10 years. Now, those impacted, which includes around 153,000 borrowers, were notified via email. And here's what the email read this morning. Congratulations. All or a portion of your federal student loans will be forgiven because you qualify for early loan forgiveness under my administration's SAVE plan, says the email message from Biden. I hope this relief gives you a little more breathing room, Biden writes in the message. Now, the administration says that it has now approved loan discharges totaling nearly $138 billion for nearly 3.9 million borrowers through dozens of administrative actions since coming into office. So look, I think that kind of financial relief makes a lot of sense. There was a lot of controversy about the initial plan that Biden had put out, which would have immediately forgiven a certain portion of student loan debt for some borrowers. It was going to be means tested and all of that. That got struck down by the Supreme Court. But to be honest with you, the part of his debt forgiveness plan that I like the most is what we're talking about right now, where the entirety of your federal loans will be forgiven after you pay for a certain amount of time, and if you qualify for it under the terms that I just read to you. And a lot of people would be positively impacted by that. So I do want to give him credit where credit is due. But I also think that there is very clearly a political motivation here. And that's become more clear when you consider that Biden wants to ensure that people know that he's the one who did this for them. So again, this is part of his new loan repayment program known as the SAVE plan. It offers lower monthly payments based on the borrower's income. And it also is an easier path to getting their debts ultimately canceled after years of payments. Previously, borrowers under the federal income-driven repayment programs would have to make payments for 20 to 25 years before having the remaining balances forgiven. And under this new plan, borrowers who originally borrowed $12,000 or less start receiving a discharge of their remaining balance after making 10 years of payments. And the amount of time increases by 1 year for each additional $1,000 borrowed. It's a little more complicated than I would like. Just forgive the loans after 10 years. Yeah. Like, I don't know why you have to add that additional year for the additional money that was borrowed. But the department said that about 7.5 million borrowers are currently enrolled in the SAVE plan. About 4.3 million of those borrowers have income that is low enough to qualify them for a $0 monthly payment. So again, the income-based debt repayment plan is also really important, because if you're not making enough money to pay your loans, well, then the government isn't going to come after you and force you to, pay for those loans. Like, let's say you're working a minimum wage job, you don't even have enough money to afford housing in this country. So the idea that you should be making student loan payments is pretty crazy. And yes, there are plenty of people who have college degrees working in minimum wage jobs in this country, believe it or not.
We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker, because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
So John, curious what you think about all of this.
I say not, actually. I believe that minimum wage jobs are reserved for recently married 13-year-olds, and I get all of my news from Matt Walsh. So take your facts, okay, and stuff them. But yeah, so this is interesting. Both the substance of it and the politics of it are interesting. The fact that he might be being influenced by his need to bolster his numbers with young voters, that doesn't bother me at all if that's motivating this. The vast majority of what politicians do is intended to make not like regular people like them more, but just their donors like them more. In this case, it's actually focused on the voters. It seems reminiscent of what you'd imagine a democracy would look like. So I'm fine with that. I agree with you. I like the program. I certainly like it as a replacement for some of the long-term cancellation plans that came before it. I'm sure you remember. I know TYT reported it back in the day. There was one of those programs that you pay into for years and years and then it gets canceled. And then they did an analysis and like nobody ever qualified for it. And so this is obviously better. And the fact that they've done so many different rounds of this that now add up to $128 billion and like close to 4 million people, that's, 10% of the problem kind of in both categories about. So it's better than the 5% change that Jake has been talking about for many years. It's 10% change, so that's good. And by the way, like this is at least, there's so many areas in which we're very critical of Biden because he made promises and then he didn't do it. But in this area, it took a long time, but he did try to take the big swing. And we said, they're gonna demonize you. They might try to cancel it, but do it anyway, because then they're gonna look terrible. Okay, with the idea being that sure, it might get canceled, but there are political ramifications for that. So I'm not mad at him for not necessarily doing far more. It seems like he's trying to do what he can, and he did the big thing that we asked for. The only thing that's missing is where is the political consequences for it? I mean, the right tried to get it canceled. Thanks to them, it was canceled. I never hear almost anything about that. Like young voters are angry at you. Many of them stood to have their loans canceled and now they will not be, thanks to the right. Remind them of that. Cancel the little bits that you can from time to time, do that. But also let them know that the debt that they're burdened with is the debt the right wanted them to be burdened with. You have to, you have to actually like do the messaging for yourself.
So I don't have a lot of faith in Biden's messaging, and I really do think that he needs to be, since he's, and it's not just Biden, I think the Democratic Party overall and historically has been terrible at messaging. However, if he can only focus on one thing to message about that could be politically impactful and positive for his campaign, it would be focusing on how Republicans voted down their own immigration reform bill. Because I think that the migrant crisis that is hitting some of these big blue cities, like Chicago, New York, there are various parts of even Colorado that are struggling with it, Democratic strongholds, that could really stand to hurt Biden. And so I think it's important for him to make it abundantly clear that Republicans listen to Donald Trump, who wanted them to vote down a pretty harsh immigration reform bill in order to have something to campaign on for 2024 for the election. I think that might actually reap better benefits or yield better benefits in terms of messaging, but who knows? We'll see what he does. And I am actually really interested to see that there has been a little bit of movement in the polls in regard to Republicans after they served as obstructionists when it came to that immigration reform bill. Now, and I agree with you, John. I do think that this is how politics works, right? The voters aren't happy with you, then you go ahead and you do something that's likely gonna make the voters happy. No problem with that. The problem is the student forgiveness, loan forgiveness seems to be an attempt to reverse some of the damage that Biden has done with young voters in regard to his unwavering support for Israel's war on Gaza, right? And so recently, Chris Wallace was on CNN and he was talking about, the Arab American vote, the Muslim vote in Michigan, which is a huge voting bloc that Biden absolutely does need in order to win Michigan. But then he goes on to talk about other demographics that Biden has lost support from. Let's watch.
I was talking to a top Michigan Democrat over the weekend who said that, it's not just Arab Americans. They're young people, they're people of color, blacks and Hispanics who have a lot of doubts about Joe Biden and, where another candidate like Dean Phillips might not be able to put on much of a show against Biden. This Michigan Democratic official was saying, I'm worried about uncommitted. It's really a vote of no confidence or lack of confidence in Biden. And this official was worried that it could do well enough in the primary a week from tomorrow to embarrass Joe Biden.
So I show you that video because an area where Biden has done poorly has been his response to this war. And rather than addressing the concerns that people have about the war, not just with rhetoric, but with action, he has decided to kind of lean heavily in the student debt forgiveness area. I don't know if that's going to yield enough support from voters or fire the voters up enough to make the difference in the lack of support that he's seeing now. But he thinks that, maybe the answer is to ensure that these student borrowers are fully informed that Biden's the one who made this happen. A senior administration official told reporters that the emails are an important way to communicate with borrowers, to make sure emails get opened, and to raise the profile of the benefit that we're offering and encourage more borrowers to take advantage of them. So previously, when loans were being forgiven and student borrowers were notified about it, the emails didn't include Biden's name. And so when those emails were being shared on social media and people were super excited, the campaign was worried that Biden wasn't getting any credit for that. So now they've taken the method that, quite honestly, they were giving Trump a lot of crap for the COVID stimulus checks. Remember, he wanted to have his name signed on them. They're now using the same strategy, and I think that's smart. I do think that's smart. You should get credit for something that you have accomplished. I just don't know if this is gonna be enough to help Biden clinch the general election.
Yeah, I think it depends on, like, you should put your name on it to the extent that you were instrumental in it happening. So like when, politicians vote against programs and then they go back to their district like, hey, we got this money over my vote to stop it. I don't like that. If he's the one that's pushing this, then sure, he should put his name on it. I get what you're saying with the different issues that could potentially be affecting young voters. The only thing I would say, I guess, weirdly in defense of Biden in this case, is this is at least an area where he has been doing this for a very long time. Like, this is the 28th executive action that cancels some student loan debt. So obviously many of those precede, October 7th. So like, maybe focusing on it more here or making sure that his name on, you could be seen to be driven by the fact that young voters seem to have turned away from him in the past 4 months or so. But I don't think that that's why he's doing it in the first place. I feel like he now has a multi-year, sort of backlog of doing this.
Yeah, he's just ensuring that he gets appropriate credit for it. Whereas before, I feel like there wasn't enough, or there wasn't really enough focus on that aspect of it. And so, look, we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if there's any movement in the polling following the student debt forgiveness, and we'll keep you posted on it.